Today's topic is focused on, from the Bhagavad Gita, that those who worship me come to me. To those who worship lesser gods, come to those lesser gods. When Paramahansa Yoganandaji came to America in 1920, in September, his first program in Boston was on the topic of the science of religion. And one of the things that he emphasized very clearly was that unless our religion, our spirituality, really is something we connect with throughout the day, he said then it's useless if it doesn't do that. And he used the word useless, meaning it has no value unless it does that. My mother, who is now deceased, told me years ago about an experience she had at the Protestant Christian church that she went to regularly. That at the beginning of the worship service, the pastor in the sanctuary came up from the rear up to the altar, and people noticed he was carrying something under one of his arms, which is pretty unusual. And when he came to the altar, he bowed, and then he put this box down and carefully took off the lid of the box and put it beside the box. And he made no reference to this during the rest of the worship service. And people were kind of puzzled. What was this? And at the end of the worship service, he carefully put the lid of the box back on and carried it under his arm and did the recessional out of the sanctuary. Well, outside everyone was gathered with great curiosity, asking him, so what was that? What was happening there? And he said, it's how many people relate to God. He said that they'll open the box and let God out for this hour of worship, but then they put him back in and put the lid back on the box and live the rest of the week. And it is common, isn't it, in every religion that can happen. That we treat God as something outside of ourselves. That it's, okay, we'll put up with this, but gosh, we're looking forward to prasad after our worship service. It means that we're not in the experience, we're outside of it. And whenever spirituality leaves us outside, it really isn't spirituality. It's the hope of spirituality, but isn't the experience of spirituality. And for all of us, it's important that we look at each day to make that meaningful. Not only when we come together for group satsang and worship together, not only when we do the aratis, the pujas, the fire ceremonies, the kirtans. Those are very important, very, very important. And they're something that we need to really include in our lives. But they're only ways, they're only mediums for us to come to the experience itself. Because even with prayer, that whether we pray in one way or the other, whether we do our prayer through puja or arati, or we do it with an semblance of a word formula, it has to be something that really is coming from who we are, feeling already the experience of the divine, of Ishwara, of God. Because otherwise, it's like an empty affirmation. Affirmation has to come from we already know, to some degree, the experience. And then we go further and deeper in that. But perhaps you've had this experience. I know I've had the experience where sometimes when I sit to pray, it feels like words are in the way. Have you had that experience?
Yes.
That they become a distraction almost. And the prayer at that time for me is just the touch of my heart, touching God. And sometimes even a visual image can be a distraction. And it's just that feeling, that openness of being with God. And there are other times, though, and you know this as well, that word formula, that offering in words can be very, very powerful and helpful. As Yogananda Ji said, that if we can empower our words, they become like cannons bursting through the veil of delusion, shooting through and bursting through the veils of delusion. What this signifies for each one of us, we cannot rely on just habit. In anything that's involving us spiritually, habit can be helpful, but we can't be bound by habit. We need to choose always the highest and flow with that and be real with that. Because when we are tuning in that way, there's no waiting for God's response. I mean, we may still feel we're waiting for God's response because we have our karma, the obstacles, the reservations on some level. But if we can bring the sincerity, the depth of our devotion to each moment, whether it's in a formal prayer or it's in the prayer of living our lives, then there is no hesitation on God's part to be there in response to us. And what we're doing really on the spiritual path, on the spiritual journey, is simply getting better at being open to that response. But the difficulty lies in that we have the ego, we have resistance, and we can err into thinking God isn't there sometimes. But you know, there's a story that's often used as an illustration, and perhaps some of you have heard this, that it's a story of this man walking with God and on a beach, on the sand, and the two sets of footprints are imprinted on the beach. And then things get rough in the man's life. And he just feels everything is challenging. It's difficult. Overwhelmingly so. And at that point he looks down and he sees behind him there are only one set of footprints. And then he cries out to God, "Where have you gone in my time of difficulty, in my time of challenge?" And God whispers to him, "But my dear one, those are my footprints. I've been carrying you at this time of your difficulties." And so we need to trust that the divine is always there if we can get it together to really choose that, to really choose being with God. And what does that mean for us? It means we have the willingness, the openness to offer ourselves. Who knows what will happen because of our karma that's in place? But we do know we can always choose to offer. We can always choose the divine, no matter what. And if we can always pay attention to that, because there are times, as Yogananda Ji said, that we feel, where is my devotion? At that point he said, pray for devotion. Don't feel again that God has abandoned you. Just pray to the divine, to let devotion seep in to the heart once more. And as that prayer of Yogananda's that we began the service with, make my soul thy temple, make my heart thy altar, and make my love thy home. Let's choose the divine in that way.
think one of the greatest gifts that I feel I've been given in this lifetime is to have basically grown up at Ananda with Swami Kriyananda in learning attitudes about the spiritual life. I was about 25 years old when I came there, and I just felt so grateful for having someone to really... My parents were good people. It wasn't a strange situation, but I was so grateful to have someone who could really guide me in the spiritual life, but in life generally. And one of the main things that I really loved about Swamiji is his balance of wisdom and divine love and joy, and very practical and deeply devotional. And so the reason that I say this is because it just brought a strong understanding that God is personal but not a form. God is everywhere. And I've always really appreciated that, because then no matter what happens in your life, what's happened for me, I know usually how to access that feeling of the divine and open to it, and know that if I move forward, then that divine can open and can be with me. God's grace, basically, the power. And there've been, I was just thinking about different situations where that's happened, but and I'll tell you one of the songs that I really enjoy in that way is a children's song that Swami Kriyananda wrote, and Life is Beautiful. Life is beautiful, life is gay, when I give myself away, when I live to please thee, Lord, dancing in thy ray. And this is the part. Let me see thee everywhere, hear thy melodies in the air. Let me feel thy strength in me, give me joy to share. And that really, I feel like, that song wasn't around when I was evolving spiritually with Swami's guidance, but that kind of encapsulates it, that I really enjoy feeling that Divine Mother there's a face and an eyes there, but then it's infinite, because Divine Mother is in everything. And so I enjoy really feeling that, not only just being in nature, looking out the window at the trees and all of that, but in everything, in every way that I've served with Ananda. And one of the more recent ones was what I'm doing now with the Janaka Foundation. And this is very mundane stuff. It's estate planning and, just something to help people, a way to donate and that kind of thing. And there was no one else to do this when I came on the scene. This was around 2004. And I looked at that and I thought, I can do that. I don't know how to do it, but I can do it. And I thought, there's two things. One, I need to see it as a ministry. In other words, God, Divine Mother, you're going to have to do this with me. And the other is, I need education. I need to know what I'm doing. And so I went and got the education. But even in that, I thought, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I know that if I open to that divine, because I had experiences before, if I open to that, it will come and it will all work out. This is not rocket science I'm trying to do here. And so the very first thing that I was confronted with was that in estate planning, is that I had no idea about the terminology. I knew about a will. I had no idea about what a bequest was. All the terminology, in other words. So I thought, okay, let me do something practical about this. I will go and take a course on plan giving. And so I looked, and the only course available immediately, which is what I needed, was in Chicago. I live in California. I've never even really been to Chicago. And I thought, oh, Divine Mother, do I really have to go to Chicago? And I thought, nope, you just got to do it. So made the plane reservation, got on the plane, flew to Chicago, went to this very intense 3-day seminar on plan giving. But when I walked into the room, there were about 40 people there, and all of them were just like me. They were there to learn about plan giving, so to help their organizations and help serve people and all of that. So that was really fun. And I really felt a relaxation because that divine was with me, and I knew it. And I thought, I can do this. I'll just learn what I can. I'll just learn what I can. And I'm telling you this because it's a way to make that deep divine very practical in everything you do. And so that unfolded for me, and that was a wonderful experience. And then I continued on, and I struggled, and it was hard, and Pranaba had to watch me struggling, and, how do I actually do this now, and all of that. And then I started to continue my education in estate planning, and again, I always felt this very just wonderful upliftment. Now, estate planning is, it's pretty mundane stuff, but I felt divine inspiration. And so the very first time I thought, okay, there's a group in San Francisco, which is 3.5 hours away from Ananda Village. But I thought, they give good seminars, and that's periodic, and so I'll just sign up for one. I had to, because it started so early in the morning, I had to drive part way, spend the night, and then dash into San Francisco, like the traffic here in Delhi, Well, I had to dash into San Francisco, have my route exactly planned so that I knew where to park and could get to the seminar. And so I did it, I knew a little bit about San Francisco, but it was pretty intense. So one wrong turn can cost you half an hour, as you know. So anyway, I ended up and valet parking. I got the guy parking my car, and I went to walk to where the seminar was. Again, feeling inspiration, but there was it's the ferry building area in San Francisco, and there was a big open plaza. And in the middle of that plaza was a statue of Mahatma Gandhi, garlanded with flowers. I mean, nobody does this in America. But I walked out and I thought, wow, thank you, Divine Mother. What a blessing just to have that consciousness there. And then I walked in and enjoyed the seminar. All nice people that I worked with. But for me, at the point that I started doing estate planning and things, I had been on the path and been serving as a minister, as Keshava and Dayadu here and others in India. That's what Pranaba and I had done for over 20 years. So it was quite a switch in how I was serving. So I had to make it deeply spiritual. And so as I progressed on, it evolved, and it was fine. You go through all of the, again, as on the spiritual path, all the ups and downs and the high points and the struggles and all of that, but always feeling that divine presence whenever I would be aware. I'd say there's 2 points to really seeing God everywhere and feeling that divine power in your life, that presence, that love, that joy. There's 2 things to really have: awareness and smriti, memory. We have to remember to be aware. as well. And again, I say that because you can be in very mundane circumstances, but if you're aware and knowing that God is everywhere, Divine Mother is everywhere, things happen that that you think, oh, what was that? Just luck? Or, everyone will say, oh, that's just luck, or, whatever. But no, it's things that are arranged for you personally, that God is saying, don't forget, I'm here if you're listening. Many people do not listen, but if you listen, that divine is there. And so I was also in this regard remembering the story that Swami Kriyananda ji would tell about Ramprasad. And Ramprasad loved Divine Mother, great Bengali saint, Kali as the divine, and that he was out working in the garden one day, and his little daughter came up, and he was, fixing. I forget exactly what he was doing, but he was doing something that was kind of frustrating, and maybe he was singing to Divine Mother, and the little girl said, "Why do you sing those songs? Divine Mother never answers you." And then she just laughed and she ran away, And he kind of wondered about it, but then he just went on doing what he was doing. But later on that day, he came in and said to his wife, so I was out and I finished my tasks outside, and our daughter came up and laughed with me, and the wife said, well, that's not possible. Your daughter wasn't here today. And he said, no, she came up, I saw her, and we talked, and then she ran away. And the wife said, no, she hasn't been here all day long. And then finally, at the end of the day, the little girl came home. She had been visiting friends, and he said, but you were here today, right? She said, no, I wasn't here, Daddy. I was visiting, playing with my friends on the other side of the village. And then he realized that he hadn't been aware, but that he was singing to Divine Mother came to him, but in the form of his daughter. And so, we never know how these things will happen for us, but they do happen. And if you're aware, they happen more and more because they're really always happening. And I think of the life of Swami Kriyananda, and there were many, many miracles that made Ananda possible, but he was aware, and he pointed them out to us. And so those kinds of things where, you give away all of your money to buy a new car because your car is broken down right before you're about to take one of the most important trips in your life back to India, but being very practical, he just simply said, well, and didn't feel necessarily a strong presence that way of Divine Mother, one way or the other. And he said, well, practically speaking, I have to have a car. So he bought a car. He gave $1,100 to buy a car. That was all the money that he had to leave in a few days to go to India. And then, he said that was on a Friday. Monday morning, I received in the mail from someone I didn't know a check for $1,000, and it said, use it as Divine Mother wants you to. And he said, in America, people don't relate to that term, Divine Mother, very much, especially then. It was in the 1970s. And so, anyway, we find, and don't discount those. People will discount them and say, oh, well, that was just circumstance, that just happened. Well, those things will keep happening if you're aware and open to the fact that God is everywhere. Let me see you everywhere. Hear your melodies in the air. Let me feel your strength in me. give me joy to share. And the more that we live like that, the more that we feel, and it's possible because of our awareness, for that divine presence, that kripa, that grace, that power to flow through us and really be there for us in all the ups and downs, because it doesn't mean that it will solve everything and your life will just be wonderful. It means that you will feel God's presence no matter what your karma is. And that's really the most important thing, because in those ups and downs, to know that God is with you makes all the difference.